Today, we are really getting into something quite radical. It's this whole theoretical architecture that, well, it completely flips how we think about language, matter, tech, even politics.
Hmm.
But the really interesting thing, the twist, is that it grounds all of this in, like, the everyday, domestic life, building things together. We're decoding what our sources call the Kenema praxis.
That's right. And the source material for this, well, it's dense, it's philosophical, definitely inventive. It pulls from all over philosophy, theology, engineering, social science,
Yeah.
and it throws these complex-sounding terms at you, like the hyperorganon, hybrid linguistogenesis, and this really central one, the edema verb.
Okay.
But the aim, interestingly, seems intensely practical.
Right, so our goal here isn't just to define these terms like a glossary. We want to unpack this whole system as a kind of functional philosophy, a way for you to be, as they put it, well-informed about this political theology of the ordinary.
Exactly. How does this system take these huge abstract problems, things that feel overwhelming, and kind of wrestle them back down into local solvable actions?
Okay, so where do we start? The foundation.
Yeah, let's set the stage. The absolute grounding idea is what they call the hyperorganon ground. And they define it very specifically as the Kenema hybridogenesis of the Sade and the built.
Whoa, okay. Kenema hybridogenesis of the Sade and the built. Break that down. Sounds like a mouthful.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, think of it like this. The reality of the words being spoken and the reality of the physical stuff being built, the house, the wall, they're generated together at the same time. They're not separate things.
So word and action, theory and practice are born together. You can't have one without the other influencing it from the start.
Precisely. So you take the hyperobject,
Hmm.
those massive concepts like climate change or global finance, things usually stuck way out on the theoretical horizon.
Right, things too big to really grasp.
Exactly. And this system forces it back into the immediate, touchable world of the home, the community. It stops being just an abstract problem floating out there.
And when it comes back, how does it show up?
Well, it shows up as things you can actually sense, feel, smell. It maps the huge scale of the problem onto the scale where you can actually do something. So they talk about house breath.
House breath.
Yeah, like the actual rhythm of life inside the building. Or the sound of a veranda echo the memory held in the space. The specific mortar scent from a block you just laid.
Okay, I get it. Very sensory.
Very sensory. And even the kind of necessary patience involved, which they capture with this phrase, a goat's patience. It's about taking the big abstract concept and forcing it back into the local, demanding you engage with it physically.
Okay, let's dig into that first big idea then. The hyperorganon transition. We usually think of a hyperobject, like you said, as just too vast, too spread out. It's just this overwhelming horizon. How does it become a hyperorganon? What's the switch?
It's about agency, really, the motive force. The hyperobject only becomes a hyperorganon, the sources say, when kinship covenantion its vast mass into choreographed nearness.
Kinship covenant. That's another great term.
Isn't it? It fuses that deep relational commitment, the covenant, the vow, with practical, almost mechanical action, the engine. So the huge scale of the problem gets harnessed, managed by people working together, bound by a promise.
So it's not just seeing the big picture. It's actively pulling that vastness into a specific local thing that the group manages together. And that whole mechanism depends on kinship and this shared vow.
Absolutely. If the people stop working together under that vow, the hyperorganon basically just collapses. It reverts back to being an overwhelming, unmanageable hyperobject again.
Okay, so it's dynamic. And it's not just a metaphor, right? They're quite insistent on that.
No, definitely not just a metaphor. They call it a kinemathesis of matter. Kinemathesis, learning by doing, but specifically learning by dwelling. A dynamic process grounded in the place itself.
Learning by dwelling.
And the examples they give are quite striking, almost theological. Things like stone consents to liturgy and breath consents to wall.
Wow. Okay, stone consents to liturgy. That completely reframes building, doesn't it? Materials aren't just passive stuff you use.
Exactly. They're participants, active participants in this, well, liturgy of building. They agree. They consent to the role they're playing.
But what does consent mean for, like, a rock? How does a rock consent?
Well, I think it means respecting its reality, its nature. It's the mason understanding the grain of the stone, working with it, not just against it. It's ensuring the wall can breathe properly, understanding how the mortar works best.
So the consent is shown in how well it performs its function. If you respect the stone, it holds up the wall.
That seems to be the idea. Its durability, its stability within the structure, that's its performance, and it's kind of contingent on the builder's respect for its inherent qualities.
Okay, that leads us straight into this idea of flat ontology. which usually feels very abstract, very philosophical. But here, they seem to ground it physically.
They really do.
Yeah.
Normally, yeah, flat ontology just means everything exists on the same plane ideas, rocks, people, code, whatever.
Right.
The sources acknowledge that philosophical idea, that continuum, flat, vital, processual, but they say its truth, its reality, actually thickens when a palm slides over laterite, when you touch it.
So the abstract idea of equality only really lands, only gains weight through physical touch, through engaging with the material world.
Precisely. The theory has to be confirmed by the body, by the act of dwelling. And this leads directly to what they call parity and covenant.
Parity and covenant.
It's this kind of post-structural equalization, but very specifically applied. Everything gets dignity as a task, as a necessary part of the whole functioning system.
Everything. Like what?
Like the rock, the child playing nearby, the rooster crowing in the morning, the rafters holding up the roof. Each one is an equal participant, an actant needed for the collective life to work.
So if the rooster doesn't crow, the rhythm's off. If the rafter breaks, the deal with the stone is broken?
That's the logic, yeah. There's hierarchy in function. Obviously, the rafter has to hold the roof. But there's equality in being essential to the covenant.
That's a really interesting take. And what about that philosophical idea of the object's withdrawal? You know, that we can never fully grasp an object.
Right. A big theme in object-oriented ontology. They tackle that too. They argue this withdrawal isn't some kind of empty void or just absence.
Okay.
They call it a concealed glory. It's like the neighborhoodliness of the holy. The sacred is right there in the everyday stuff, but it refuses to be completely captured or analyzed or systematized.
The neighborhoodliness of the holy. I like that. It's present, but it won't be pinned down.
Exactly. And you don't need to decode it intellectually. You'll learn it differently. They say you porch school it.
Porch school it.
Yeah. Through sunrise catechesis of shade, bucket, broom, song. Learning is immediate sensory, part of the daily rhythm, not abstract analysis.
So theology becomes this very practical, domestic thing embedded in the neighborhood. And that clarifies what the hyperorganon is. It's not a diagram, not a blueprint you just follow. It's a craft forge, a place where kinship hammers out a rhythm until, as they say, the wall hums soft. The building isn't just executing a plan, it's this ongoing, rhythmic, relational act that shapes the building and the builders.
That makes sense. And they give a specific example, don't they? The CAL, to keep things grounded.
Yes, the CAL. It's like a built-in correction mechanism for when theory or maybe emotion starts to drift away from the physical reality.
Okay, so walk us through how that CAL actually works. What's the mechanism?
So imagine the philosophical discussion gets too dense, too abstract, it risks floating off. The CAL says, stop, pause the talk.
Just stop.
Yeah, and reconnect physically. The example is, the palm remembers heat. You touch something real, something part of the built environment. Fingertips catch the micro edges of a cured plaster ridge.
Ah, okay. A direct physical check. Exactly. And the ridge answers with stored noon. The stored warmth, the stored energy, the stored time from the sun. Your body is literally checking the theory against the material reality.
So the philosophy, the language, the lexicon as they call it, can only start up again after that physical recalibration. When your breathing slows, when the porch shadow shifts your sight.
That's the idea. If the language detaches from your body's actual experience in the house, it loses its meaning. The physical act of dwelling has to recalibrate the truth of the word.
The house itself becomes the reference point.
Yeah, they even say the house acts as a psalter, like the wind flips the corrugated roof sheets like pages. The structure itself confirms or corrects your thoughts. An insight is basically worthless unless the heat stored in that plaster confirms it.
Okay, so if the hyperorganon is the built world brought alive by this covenant, then the language used within that world, this hybrid linguistogenesis, must also come directly from that physical reality, from the labor itself.
Absolutely. This is where they bring in this core idea of grit in language. Yeah, grit. Theoretical speech, they argue, only stays grounded, only stays real, if it hand-scribes a real. The syllables themselves have to carry grit like dirt under your fingernails.
Wow.
And they say, the verb that never met sweat is a tax on meaning.
A tax on meaning. That's a direct shot at, well, a lot of academic language, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
If a term is just abstract, if it hasn't been tested against physical work, it doesn't just fail to communicate clearly, it actually takes away value from the conversation instead of creating real functional meaning.
So how is language generated then, if not from abstract theory?
They define linguistogenesis as morphology before theory. The shape of the word comes first, shaped by the action.
Morphology before theory.
Yeah. You shape language like you shape wet cement. patient, repetitive, exact.
Yeah.
And often, it's sung. The process is communal. You might chant the word ladder ties while working with laterite blocks.
Oh, like a work song.
Exactly. But with this added layer. The rhythmic chant helps the workflow, helps align everyone, the kin braid, the bodies working together. The verb itself has to feed, shelter, steady the community. If it doesn't do that, it's just rhetoric without ribs, empty words.
This leads to a very different way of thinking about innovation too, doesn't it? Usually we think innovation starts with disruption, maybe a lab.
Right. But here, innovation doesn't start with disruption. It starts in the kin forge.
Kincord, another great word.
Yeah. It starts in family circles, matching breath levels during work, speech supporting that work.
So how do they test a new word, a new concept?
It's not pitched or marketed. It's soil chanted into being. Its rhythm, its feel is tested against the actual sounds of daily life. Like the thud of a bucket, the scritch of a broom, the soft scuff of a child's sandals. If the word clashes with those sounds, if it feels awkward or useless during the rhythm of chores,
Then it fails the test.
it fails the test. It can't keep covenant. It's this immediate real-world stress test for language.
That's incredibly practical, actually, very rigorous. The word has to fit the life. And the process isn't like following a blueprint, they say. It's numbraid.
Numbraid, yeah. Pneuma, breath, braiding breath with the task, task with kin, kin with memory. It's this cycle.
Okay, explain that cycle.
Each cycle of this braiding work, breath, relationship, memory produces a trial word. And the test isn't just, is it linguistically correct? It's functional. It's relational.
How so?
They ask, does quarrel shrink? Does patience lengthen? Does laughter quicken? That's how they measure if the word works.
So does it improve the social and emotional health of the group?
Exactly. There are no spreadsheets or statistical metrics. They know by the feeling, by the warmth. If the word helps cool arguments on the veranda, it lives. If it puffs up someone's ego or promotes individualism over the group, they retire it.
So the word's value is its contribution to harmony, to socio-neuroplastic harmony, maybe, not just how clever it sounds.
That's a good way to put it. And it's a clear rejection of what they call abstraction's empire. It's replaced by Coven-Weave's pedagogy.
Coven-Weave pedagogy, teaching through the covenant.
Yeah. It refuses that top-down, single authority model of knowledge. Instead, the child asks, the mother answers, the father amends, the aunt corrects, the neighbor laughs, and truth congeals.
Truth congeals. It's messy, collaborative.
It is. And a word, a concept, only survives that process if it becomes hearthkeep,
Hearthkeep.
a guardian of the domestic flame, the center of the community's life. It has to serve that center.
And how do they remember all this? How do they store this knowledge if it's so tied to action and place? Not digitally, I assume.
Definitely not. They porch store memory.
Porch store.
Yeah, memory is hung on nails, folded in cloth, repeated at dusk. The important knowledge is physically present, integrated into the home. Verbs are firmware without circuits, archive without cold metal.
Firmware without circuits. Wow. So knowledge can't just accelerate away from lived experience.
Exactly. The pace of discourse is tied to the promise, to the covenant. The path can't outrun the soul, they might say. Every new idea has to slow down enough to be physically woven into the community's space and memory.
Okay. And given this is a hybrid world, Kenema, what about different languages? How does that fit? They mentioned transvocalization.
Right, that's crucial. This hybridity isn't just theoretical. It embraces linguistic shifts in practice. The source mentions an auntie shifts from Mende to French to English,
Okay.
not to impress cosmopolists, but to coven-weave generations into a mutual hearing.
Ah, so switching languages isn't about showing off. It's about connection.
Exactly. It's a tool for cohesion, specifically used to bridge gaps maybe between generations with different colonial schooling or between neighbors with different first languages. It's an active process of translating for each other to make sure everyone's part of the same covenant, the same understanding.
Instead of feedback, they practice breath back.
Yeah, that's another great phrase they use. Breath back, call and answer, chest to chest, veranda to courtyard, noon to dusk. It's immediate relational communication.
This feels like we're getting to the absolute core now, the etymoverb. You said earlier it's the ultimate hyperorganon, the main tool.
Yes, absolutely. It seems to be the focal point where language and matter really fuse most intensely. It's the active ingredient in this whole philosophy.
And it comes from Kenema etymological hybridization.
That's the process. And they define this outcome, the etymoverb, as a flat Afro liberation.
Flat Afro liberation, okay.
It's this radical insistence that this hybrid word, this neologism they create, isn't just a word. It is living. It's flat-ontic, meaning it exists on the same plane as material things. It's sacred, it's literal, and it's radically alive. The word isn't a sign pointing to something else. The word is the thing happening.
So this directly challenges that whole Western idea of language as just representation, right? Where the word is separate from the thing it represents.
Completely. They see that separation as part of a colonial wound, this logic of lack and distance. This hybridization, the etymverb, is meant to be a reparative suture for that fracture.
Okay. And it's not linguistics, it's engineering.
Yes, engineering. It's framed as a practical act of building, the kenopraxis, they say. Keno, like kenosis, self-emptying. Language empties itself of being about the world.
And becomes.
Language as the world. Where typical semiotics just describes systems, the etymverb is intended to rebuild the system. It becomes a political and theological tool, even a weapon.
How seriously do they take that material status? Can you give an example?
Okay, so take the word Kenema. It means something like to forge something in Kenema according to a vow.
Right.
They state this word, Kenema, has the same onyx status, the same level of reality as the hammer being used, the laterite block being placed, and the arm swinging the hammer.
Wait, the word has the same reality as the hammer?
That's the claim. If the hammer breaks, the word Kenema is also considered fractured. If the vow behind the work is broken, the hammer loses its divine force, its effectiveness.
So it's like vital materialism, but charged up with spirit. Pneumatological materialism.
That's a good way to think about it. It's the word as breath at work. Sacramental materialism made audible. The word itself confers the grace of coherence onto the tools and the task.
Okay, if the word has the same status as a tool, does it also have agency? Can it do things on its own?
Yes, exactly. The etymverb isn't just a tool humans wield, it's an actant. They borrow that term from actor network theory, but rework it as covenant network theory.
An actant, meaning?
Meaning it acts within the network.
Mm-hmm.
The phrase word kinweave, for example, isn't just describing community. It's the acoustic loom itself that transjects individuals, pulls them through, and transforms them into this covalent assemblage, this bonded group.
The sound wave itself is the bond.
That seems to be the idea. The vibrational resonance of the chant is the network's coherence, literally.
And this is charged with pneuma, with divine breath.
Yes. The etymverb is seen as a vessel charged with pneuma. When you speak it correctly, with intent, within the covenant, it injects divine insistence into the physical act.
Divine insistence.
It's what they call theotechnical immanence, but in a very low-tech, acoustic form. It's like cosmotechnics of the psyche, shaping the mind that will then shape the matter. They even talk about the hierarchical, the somatic geometry of a strike, like the ideal way to swing the hammer. The idea is that the word itself preforms the neurology, gets your body ready before you even grip the tool. The word conditions the body for the perfect action before the muscle fires.
Wow, okay. That leads into what sounds like its most radical function, especially if you're focused on getting things done. The stamina org function, it's a somatic accelerant.
Yes, but this is where the living word directly engineers human biology, or that's the claim. It's designed to generate volition, willpower, movement, stamina, and joy.
It generates stamina and joy.
Right. It acts as the psychoanalytic engine, maybe, of the whole community. The core idea is verb cum accelerationize. The word itself speeds up the arrival of the desired future.
But acceleration usually makes us think of tech, computers, speed.
Right, but here it's different. The etymverb is a chronoforge. It shapes and compresses time. But it does this not through computation, but through metabolic efficiency and pedagogical compression.
Metabolic efficiency and pedagogical compression, meaning it optimizes the human body and the learning process itself.
Exactly. It makes people work better, learn faster, together.
That's really counterintuitive. How does language compress time through the body? This is where shard learning comes in.
Yes, somatic data compression via etymverb shard learning. They describe it quite provocatively as trauma epistemology weaponized.
Trauma epistemology weaponized. What does that mean?
Okay, think about painful, slow learning. High latency bodily data, the mistake you made, the failed attempt, the injury, the broken vow, the trauma associated with learning the hard way.
Right, learning from painful mistakes takes time and energy.
This process supposedly compresses all that painful, slow data into a single linguistic unit. A word, an etymverb. They call this the meta component. And then this compressed linguistic unit is passed efficiently to the kin, the community, to the extra component.
So the community gets the lesson, the wisdom, without everyone having to go through the original pain or slow process.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
You bypass the slow, painful trial and error, The verb accelerates competence, and this is how it builds the vow muscle,
The vow muscle.
the collective capacity for commitment, for resilience, for sticking to the plan. The word, chanted together during work, synchronizes everyone's bodies into a single kinship metabolism. It generates a collective willpower that's supposedly greater than the sum of its parts. The vow stops being abstract. It's this acoustic, vibrational force pushing your hands, making you complete the task. The word becomes pure somatic volition.
Okay, translating painful lessons into shared wisdom, that's huge. But it also seems linked to this focus on joy, re-engineering feelings almost. You mentioned the word playlosoda.
Yes, playlosoda. They describe it as the linguistic tool for libido grafting.
Libido grafting.
Yeah. It's about detaching the community's collective emotional energy, their libido, their drive from negative cycles, maybe resentment or feelings of lack inherited from colonial history, and grafting that energy directly onto the joyful, productive acts of building together, caring for each other.
And playlosoda isn't just a concept about joy, it's a tool itself, an interoceptive event.
Exactly. That's a key claim. It's not metaphorical. The sound of the word, used in the right context, is meant to actually change the internal feeling state of the body, how you feel inside.
And they connect this to actual science.
They do, explicitly.
Yeah.
They say this mechanism is a psychoneuroimmunology and socio-neuroplasticity in practice. PNI, the link between mind, nervous system, and immune system. Socio-neuroplasticity, how social interactions shape our brains.
So by using specific words, chants, actions, they believe they are actively managing the physical health, the neurological state, and the immune response of the community.
That's the framework, yes.
So the word playlosoda could literally rewire the brain, like encouraging the play circuit, the seeking enjoyment circuit in effective neuroscience.
Instead of the fear circuit, which triggers anxiety and withdrawal.
Exactly. They see it as engineering the mind through language and action for intrinsic joy, for resilience.
Wow. And the word becomes a somatovolt, a unit of energy.
A quantifiable unit, supposedly, of bodily energy and even immunological resilience. This internal vibrational reality is the proof of the word's aliveness. They call it haptico-lexical force.
Haptico-lexical force. The touch, the feel, the energy of the word itself. This makes the ethics of any project incredibly clear then. Very localized.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental constraint. Big ideas, hyperobjects, can only be pursued ethically if they coven measure their scope against a single kitchen.
Coven measure against a kitchen.
Meaning innovation sins, as they put it. If the cooking pot goes empty because the big project sucked up all the attention, all the labor, all the resources, that's the ultimate reality check, isn't it? The criterion is how steady. Does the fancy off-grid building actually function? Does it inhale evenly? Does the word flesh the reality created by the words hold up when the rain hammers the roof?
Right. If the structure, or the words guiding it, fail to maintain that basic domestic integrity, the whole project is morally flawed, no matter how clever the theory sounds.
And this all culminates in theopoiesis, making the divine, but through everyday life.
Yes. This whole system forbids separating the spiritual from the mundane. No word gets to just float above the courtyard, detached from the task. Theopoiesis isn't some grand performance, it's the coven daily.
The Pavan daily.
The daily rhythm. Floors swept, water fetched, verse recited, maybe checking the solar panel, blessing a child, seating a guest, keeping silence at the right moment. That is the making of the divine.
It's a spiritual discipline lived out through maintenance and care.
Exactly. And the word hearth map, the way language maps onto the meal, the sharing of food, they call it the Eucharistic ecology, made literal, made imminent.
Eucharistic ecology.
The sacred presence isn't somewhere else. It's right there in a preparing, sharing, eating food together. Oncology stops being abstract philosophy. It becomes word flesh into a kitchen, a wash line, a bench.
Okay, so this entire system, this architecture, it clearly has huge political implications. It seems designed to push back against, well, against modernity as we know it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The sources are very direct about this. They state this deep dive, this praxis, is not a museum piece. It's sunsum synthetic breath. Sunsum meaning spirit or soul. In Aiken, synthetic meaning constructed engineered. It refuses to be just data for someone else's system.
And they say, we do not worship the algorithm.
Right. A clear statement of resistance against technocratic control. The political core is defined both by what it rejects and what it affirms.
What does it reject?
It rejects radical centrism, that sort of mushy middle ground that often just maintains the existing power structures. And it rejects what it sees as modernity's hollow promises, particularly purely material progress that ignores the spiritual or communal.
Okay, and it affirms a kind of accelerationism. but different from the usual tech-focused kind.
Very different. They practice covenantal accelerationism, acceleration where the steps forward are like a pilgrimage, guided by a promise, by the vow, and Afro-optimist accelerationism.
How is it driven then, if not by tech?
It's driven by that vow muscle we talked about and the efficiency gained through shard learning. It's acceleration directed towards a specific, sacred, community-centered goal, not just speed for speed's sake.
So how does this vision translate into economics? It sounds anti-capitalist, but also very focused on productive work.
It is. They advocate for Sabbath to growth economics.
Sabbath to growth.
Yeah, the idea of intentionally pausing certain kinds of economic activity, maybe speculation, unnecessary production, to deliberately make time and space for care, for community needs, for spiritual reflection, like a Sabbath principle applied to the economy. And alongside that, steady integralism as symbiosis, everything working together harmoniously.
And how does it respond to things like techno-feudalism, where a few big companies control essential infrastructure?
Their answer is direct. Kin-owned solar, code, and soil.
Kin-owned solar, code, and soil. Wow. Taking back the means of production for the 21st century: energy, information, food.
Exactly. Making sure the local covenant, the local community, stays autonomous and isn't dependent on these huge external systems. The hyperorganon itself, the built environment, becomes the infrastructure of that resistance.
Okay. What else defines their political social vision?
Well, they accept post-developmentalism as plural telos, meaning they reject the idea that there's only one path to development, usually the Western one. They believe in multiple goals, multiple ways of flourishing.
Right.
They aim to heal double coloniality, the legacy of colonialism affecting both people's minds and the land itself. And they do this by establishing covenantal hierarchy without domination.
Hierarchy without domination. How does that work?
It sounds like establishing order based on recognized roles, maybe service, experience, age, but ensuring those roles don't become tools for oppression or extracting value from others. It's hierarchy based on responsibility within the covenant.
Okay. And you mentioned Pan-Africanism.
Theotechnical Pan-Africanism as infrastructure. So shared technology, owned by kin groups across regions perhaps, but built on these sacred principles using the enema verb. That technology forms the basis of connection.
And social status. Meritocracy.
Ethical meritocracy based on service. Your standing comes from demonstrated care for the community, not from accumulating wealth. And it all operates within an economy of gift, underpinned by this covenantal social contract.
So the whole structure, political, economic, social, is built on contribution and relationship, not extraction.
That seems to be the core principle, which demands a very different way of even acquiring knowledge, right? To stop knowledge itself becoming just another tool for extraction.
Right, the methodology stack. How do they layer knowledge gathering to keep it grounded?
It's layered carefully. Autoethnography, personal experience, becomes testimony valid data for the community. Phenomenology, careful observation, returns as sacramental attention, seeing observation itself as a form of devotion. Semiotics, the study of signs, is reframed as a sign and spirit reunion, where the word and the thing it represents are unified again by pneuma.
And what about more standard scientific approaches?
They're integrated, but explicitly humbled by this domestic focus. Grounded theory, building theory from data, becomes porch coding of care. You gather data by observing acts of care right there on the porch.
And the source says the neurobiosocial model has to be humbled by kitchen heat. Why the kitchen heat?
Because the kitchen heat represents that irreducible reality of relational health, basic survival needs. That's the ultimate ethical test. If your complex biological or social models lead you to neglect the actual well-being of the household, the theory has failed, no matter how sophisticated it is.
It keeps circling back to that.
It does. And they even bring in epigenetics as confirming repentance.
Epigenetics confirms repentance.
Yeah, the idea that deep, committed changes in behavior, aligning with the covenant, might actually lead to measurable, perhaps even heritable, changes in how genes are expressed. It's linking theology directly to biology.
That's bold. And computational theology, what does that mean here? Not AI priests, I hope.
No, not AI priests. It returns as divine feedback, prayer, and correction. It's a self-correcting loop within the hyperorganon system itself. The community computes its relationship with the divine through prayer, through feedback, through course correction based on the covenant.
So the sciences are welcomed, but they have to acknowledge their limits when faced with immediate relational material reality.
Exactly. It all synthesizes into this idea of logos in dust.
Logos in dust. The word, the divine reason, is material, embedded in the world, in the dust.
Right. That phrase really captures that flood into theological insistence. The word is divine matter in motion. It's radically alive right here. They see it as hyper-object theory maturing into hyper-covenant. New materialism finally receiving the logos, the spirit, back into the dust.
And the whole point of all this complex hybridity isn't just to be clever.
No, it's to stop being just a buzzword and become actual joinery. Meticulous, careful joining of all these parts, word, matter, spirit, body, community, into a single working breath economy.
A breath economy where power itself changes definition.
Yes, where power isn't about control or accumulation, but about service. Power must serve.
Yeah.
Empty itself, like kenosis, to make room,
Make room for what?
so that joy can home settle and stay. That's the ultimate goal. Hashtag Taychag outro.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive into the Kenema praxis has been, well, quite a journey. Philosophical, theological, deeply practical. We've gone from the vastness of the hyperobject right down to the feel of a plaster ridge. The core ideas seem clear, though. The hyperorganon pulls that vastness into tangible nearness through collective, covenanted work. Hybrid linguistogenesis insists that words carry grit, proving their worth in the rhythm of daily chores.
Right. And the edema verb acts as that self-emptying word tool, that stamina that builds the collective vowel muscle by compressing past pain into usable wisdom somatic data compression.
It's this really radical commitment to blatant theological insistence the word is divine matter, alive and acting in the world. And the measure of success isn't the project budget, it's the stability of the kitchen.
Exactly. The aim is for all this hybridity to become real joinery, a coherent system where everything connects, right down to sweeping the floor and sharing food. A single breath economy.
And the sources end with this powerful image. Escatogenesis turns apocalypse to childbirth. If the edema verb really is a chronoforge, speeding up the desired future by compressing the past's hard lessons.
Then that compressed wisdom, that shard learning, becomes a potent tool for building that desired future right here, right now.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe carry forward. According to this praxis, the future isn't built out there somewhere. It's built through these small material acts of care and kinship right where you are.
So if the word, the shared vow, is the engine of that acceleration, and the goal is that home-settled joy, what specific collective vow muscle could you, in your own context, start building today? Rooted in the tangible relational acts of your life, your community, how could you achieve that compression and accelerate a future based on care?